So, hello learners and welcome back. Today we'll be covering Unit 4 of Block 1 from American Literature. All My Son's Characterization. The complete explanation of this video will be in 5 parts, I think. We'll cover the major characters each in one part. So there are 5 parts, and the minor characters all in one video. So in total there would be 6 parts to this chapter, to this unit. I hope you watch them all carefully. So the major characters are Joe Keller, Chris Keller, Kate Keller, Ann Deaver, and George Deaver. In this video, we'll be covering with Joe Keller. Joe Keller. Critic Paul Blumberg in his article Work as Alienation in the Plays of Arthur Miller. In Arthur Miller, New Perspectives, edited by Robert A. Martin says. So critic, this man, Paul Blumberg, he's a critic. The work of critics is to find how a novel, how a book, or how anything that is related to their field of work is lacking somewhere, is has some kind of leniency, some kind of mistakes in it, how it could be better, right? So this critic, he must have been a famous critic, Paul Blumberg. That's why he is mentioned in this play, in this note. Sorry. So he wrote an article by the name Work as Alienation in the Plays of Arthur Miller. So work as alienation basically means that he is looking at this work, looking at this play as an alien. Alien here means as a person who is not connected with the play, as an unprejudiced person, you can say. So he says that Joe Keller, manufacturer and central figure in All My Sons, has a moral perspective no larger than the fence that surrounds his factory or the grass growing evenly around his own house. Now, before everything else, let me tell you that all this that is highlighted in the green is actually the notes. You can shorten them up a bit by yourself and then write them down if you wish. But I've basically highlighted all the important aspect, all the important part that I thought would be useful to you. But still, if you wish to make even shorter notes, then you can just edit them yourself. So he's saying that Joe Keller, he's a manufacturer and he's the main figure in this play. And he has a moral perspective that is no larger than the fence that surrounds his factory or the grass growing evenly around his own house. So he's saying that Joe Keller's moral perspective is not very good. It's not very big. It is a very small moral perspective. And he only cares about a good few people that are around and near him. It means that he does not think for a large society of people, a large number of people. Morally, he thinks or cares only about a good few chosen people. Joe Keller is not a selfish. However, Joe Keller is not selfish, disagreeable, or greedy industrialist. So this thing must be noticed. Though Joe Keller cares only about a few people around him, around his family, but he is not a selfish kind of person. So it basically means, like, suppose you care about your friends, right? But you don't go around hurting other people for that reason, right? You don't go around hurting everyone else you see in the streets. So you're just someone who keeps to yourself, who keeps to his own family, who keeps to his own friends. So in the same way, Joe Keller is not a selfish person. He is not disagreeable, nor is he a greedy industrialist. So it's like if the world was all good, all well, it's not like this person, it's not like you would go around picking pockets or you would go around hurting people, killing them, right? But if suddenly the world changed for the worse, suddenly let's say there was a zombie apocalypse, or there's some kind of natural disaster, right? So in order to protect your friends and family, you may have to kill other people, you may have to hurt other people, you may have to rob from other poor people, right? But it's not like you would do the same things if everything was good. So you are not by nature a greedy or selfish person. By nature, you are just a person who cares about his family and friends. But the thing is that you care more about them than you care about anyone else, right? And this is only natural. This happens with everyone else. You care more about your parents than somebody else's parents, right? So same goes for Joe Keller. Joe Keller cares more about his family than anyone else. But this is taken to a bit of an extreme situation, right? So this is actually taken to a huge extent. Joe Keller is not selfish, he is not disagreeable, or nor is he a greedy industrialist. He is really an ignorant, good-natured and kindly fool. So Paul Blumberg has called Joe Keller an ignorant, means he's ignorant, he doesn't have a lot of common sense, he's not aware of many things. He is good natured and he is a kind fool whose love for his wife and family is genuine and unselfish. So they're saying that he really loves his wife and family, and there is no second thoughts about it. Joe Keller, the chief character of this play, is in his 60s. So he's anywhere from the age of 60 to 70 years old. Most probably from 60 to 65. So he's an amicable, means a friendly person. He's a warm person and he loves social life. He loves to blend in with other people, just like we can see how blended he is with his neighbors. He is a self-made man and he has no education. It means he wasn't properly educated and he's a self-made man. He hasn't inherited his father's business or got it in charity. He made it through sheer hard work. He still manages to set up a successful business after 40 years of hard work. So it took him 40 years of hard work to set up a successful business. But in the end, he still did it. He had struggled to earn his livelihood from the age of 10 and as a result knows the value of money. So he had been struggling to make ends meet since the age of 10. And that is the reason why he knows how valuable money is, how important money is for himself and his family. A man with little intellect, he does not have a lot of brain, lacks common sense, like I said previously. Every simple thing makes him wonder. So he's kind of like a child. He's always curious. He doesn't have a lot of common sense. He's always curious about wondering about things. He has values that are old fashions and judgments based on his experience. So he has those values. He has some values that are very old fashioned, and judgments that are based only on his own experience, because he's an uneducated person. So he doesn't have experience to fall back off on other persons. See, when you read a book, you read it through the perception of the writer, through the perception of the author. When you read some novels or some stories, it may be that the author has told you about his own experience as a child, as a grown up. You get to know other people's views, you get to know the experience, you get to feel the experience of other people. But this is not the same with an uneducated person. An uneducated person has only his own experience to rely back on. He hasn't read books, he hasn't read novels or stories about other people, so that he can understand what other people feel or what other people's experiences must have been. So that is why they say that he has only his own experience. He has judgments that are based on his experience. A loving father to his sons, no doubt, Keller feels honored to have sons, but having lost one of them in the war, he wishes he had no sons so that he would not have to send them to fight in the war. So this is the dilemma with every parent. Of course, he is proud to have sons, but then suddenly he thinks, maybe if I never had any sons, then I wouldn't feel uh, the, the sorrow of losing them. I wouldn't feel so disheartened when they died, right? So the same goes for me. Like, I have had pets for a long period of my time of my life, but whenever they die, I suddenly feel so sad, and then I start thinking that next time I will have no pet, next time I will not adopt any dog, not buy any dog, right? So this is the same thing with many people. When our loved ones die, we suddenly starts going back to things. We suddenly start realizing that, what if I were always alone? What if I never had any parents? It would have been good if I never had any brother. Then I wouldn't have to feel this sad when he died. Then I wouldn't have to feel all this sorrow, right? So he's also basically thinking the same things. War has changed his opinion and ideas. War is obviously a very difficult and tough time, and this war, it has changed his opinions. It has changed his way of looking at things, as it does to everyone else, right? Keller is fun-loving, jovial, and becomes a child. So Keller is a fun-loving person. He is jovial, a happy person, and he becomes a child while interacting with children. Like I previously said, he is more so like a child. He makes friends with 8-year-old Bert, the son of Frank and Lydia, who equally likes him. So he's kind of friendly with the 8-year-old Bert, and he becomes very childish, very like how our elders become with us. It's in the same manner. Like, if you meet a small child of 5 or 6 years age, then you start acting childishly, right? In order to please him, you start your way of talking suddenly changed, your way of behaving suddenly changed so as to please the child. Uh, in the same way, Joe Keller also behaves with this 8-year-old Bert, and Frank and Lydia are his neighbors, Joe's neighbors. A family man, Keller has great concern and affection for his wife. So Keller, he's a person who has very great affection for his family, like we've mentioned again and again. So it's basically the same thing. So Keller has great affection for his family, and especially he loves his wife. So in family, I think we should first market what his family is. Okay, so Joe Keller's family basically consists of only three people, aside from himself, of course. So these three people are his wife. I don't remember, Kate Keller, yeah, Kate Keller, and his two sons, Chris Keller and what was his name then? Chris Keller and Joe Keller. No, Joe Keller is the same guy. Sorry. So Chris Keller, and there was this other son of his. I don't remember his name, but basically this is his family. This is what he considers as his family: his two sons and his wife. Then moving on, it disturbs him whenever Kate is upset. So it highly disturbs him when Kate is upset. Keller is solicitous for his wife, having to work in the kitchen whenever the maid servant is absent. So solicitous means showing great attention or concern to another, expressing care or concern. So they're saying that Keller gets very anxious. He shows very great concern for his wife whenever she has to work in the kitchen when the maid is absent. So for most of us people, it's like a normal thing. Our mothers work in the house all the time. Most of us don't have any maids to work at home, right? But in America, I think it's a different story there. In most of the houses, maids work there. So the thing is that now they've become so dependent on the maids that even when they have to work on their own, sometimes on the holidays maybe, they can't handle things properly, right? They don't know how to handle the day-to-day activities of their own house, and for this reason Keller becomes very careful, very caring for his wife, that she has to work so hard. He is anxious about his wife's belief that Larry is alive and would be back one day. And he is also worried about his wife's belief that Larry is alive. Yeah, this is the second son of Joe Keller, Larry Keller. Because Larry is presumed to be dead by everyone else, but not by Kate Keller. Kate still believes that Larry would come back, and this is a matter of concern for Joe Keller. He believes that it might affect his wife's health or brain. He is anxious. Keller does not want to interfere much in Chris' choice of his bride, for he believes that marriage is entirely one's own affairs. However, he is concerned that Kate would not like the idea of Chris marrying Larry's fiancée. So Joe basically believes that marriage is one's own concern. The parent shouldn't interfere in the child's marriage affairs, right? But on the other hand, Keller is also concerned about this marriage, about Chris' marriage, because his wife, Kate Keller, whom he loves equally, does not want Chris to marry Anne, because Kate still believes that Anne is actually Larry's fiance, and it would be very wrong of Chris to marry Anne. Yeah. Where were we? Continuing. Concerned about his wife's sentiments, Keller does not want his son to get married to Anne, as Kate would not approve of it. So he also does not want Chris to marry Anne because of this very reason, because he does not want to see his wife sad. So he asks Chris not to marry Anne, but Chris has made his decision. After knowing Chris' decision to quit home if Kate disapproves of his marriage with Anne, Keller is worried about the future of his business that had taken him his whole life to establish. So now Chris threatens his father that if his mother does not agree to their marriage, if they do not agree to their marriage, then Chris would leave the house and go live on his own. He would not do the business. He would not stay with them, and he would still marry Anne nevertheless. So now this makes Joe really anxious, because Joe had it means it had taken Joe his whole life to build this business, and of course he wants to see it growing, he wants to see it blooming. And with this business, Chris would have a very well off life than what he would have if he had to start by himself, start from the scratch. So if what was his name, sorry, Chris, if Chris takes on his dad's business, the business would also bloom, and Chris would also have a very happy, very well off life. In spite of the geniality and warmth, the tragic flaw in Keller's character allows him to betray his partner Steve Deaver. So far we have read that how good of a character Joe Keller is. He is such a friendly person. He is a good natured person. He is a social person. But despite of all these good things, despite of all these good qualities, there is still a tragic flaw, a fault in Keller's character, and that fault is what makes him betray his longtime partner Steve Deaver. His neighbors know about his manipulation of his acquittal. Acquittal means the official order of the court to release or to release an accused, and consider him. Uh, Sorry, I can't remember the actual word what it was, but basically, acquittal is uh, yeah. So basically, acquittal is what, it's a judgment by a jury that the defendant is not guilty, or it's a situation that the person who was accused is not guilty. He's not found to be guilty, and he's a safe person. It means he did not commit the crime. So this is an official order. In acquittal means it is an official judgment by the judge. Now moving on, his neighbors know. Yeah, so his neighbors know that Joe Keller is equally guilty, but still he pulled some strings in the back. He did some kind of shady work and he got himself off. But his partner Steve Deaver got abjected into it. So his partner Steve Deaver still got into jail. But still, the neighbors have included Joe Keller back into their social circle. Keller is proud of the fact that his self confidence, guts, and the proof document of his innocence have gradually allowed them to forgive him. So, Keller now feels confident about this. Keller has self confidence that, yeah, no matter what I did, but still, I managed to get back into my old life. I managed to get back into my social circles. So, this gives him a kind of confidence that, yeah, things are for the better now. Things are back to normal. His son Chris is proud of his father, who has faced the difficult times with courage, so much so that Chris wants his name to be changed as Joe McGuts. For he is a tough man who has shown guts. So now Chris. We already know that Chris idolizes his father, and now Chris thinks that his father was very had shown a lot of guts while going through this difficult time and facing it with courage. So he wants his father's name to be changed to Joe McGuts. Keller is glad that he had won the confidence of the local people, Chris, Kate, and N, and does not let anyone have an inkling that he was involved in the supply of defective cylinder heads as much as Steve Deaver. So Keller is happy about this fact. He is glad. Glad means happy. Happy about the facts that he got his old life back, and he got the confidence of the local people, of his family members, and he does not have them any idea. He does not let them have any idea that he was also as deeply involved in this criminal case as Steve Deaver was. After having wronged Steve Deaver, Keller still shows his concern for him, asking George about his father's health and whether he still has the old heart trouble. I don't think I need to translate this, it's already pretty much obvious. Keller sympathizes with Steve, saying a little man makes a mistake and they hang him by the thumbs. A big one becomes an ambassador. So basically, what they're saying is that they criticize a small man's mistake, but they glorify a big man's mistake. So if a small man has made a mistake, then they would criticize him, they would punish him. But if a big man has made a mistake, they would glorify him. They would say that he must have some big purpose behind this, he must have thought something out, he must have some other plan behind this, and so he should lead us, and he should be given up a good position in society. So this is what the difference between poor and the riches. This is what the difference between a small man and a big man is. To N's question whether he has any grievance against her father for dragging him in the defective cylinder heads case. So N asks Joe Keller whether he dislikes his father, whether he has any complaints about his father, because his father basically, what was where was we where were we? His father basically dragged him in the case too. So his father kind of you can say stabbed him in the back, but it's the other way around, obviously. So Keller replies to this that he believes in the policy of forgiving and forgetting. Now suddenly he becomes A Christian, yeah. So he believes in the policy of forgiving and forgetting and had no grievances against him. So he's saying that no, I have already forgiven him and I don't have any grievance against my old partner. In order to reduce his guilt, Keller wants to help Deaver re-establish himself once he's out of jail. So obviously in the background, somewhere deep inside, Keller is always feeling guilty that he got Steve Deaver into the jail. So in order to reduce some of this guilt, he wants to re-establish Steve Deaver once he is out of jail. Confronted by Chris, Keller is compelled to reveal the truth of the case. So once he is confronted by Chris, Keller he is forced to reveal the truth of the case. Keller gives account of the entire incident of the supply of defective cylinder heads to the army, implicating Steve Deaver as the main accused. So Keller tells about all of that incident, about what actually happened in the supply of that defective cylinder heads to the army, and how he got Steve Deaver involved in this case. To justify his acts, Joe says that he had supplied the defective cylinder heads to save himself and the family from those of bankruptcy. So, in order to justify his criminal acts, he says that I did all of this for the family, for the welfare of the children, for the welfare of my own family. He says that if I hadn't done this, then we would have gone bankrupt, we would have gone on the streets. Otherwise, he would have to discard the defective cylinder heads, and as a result, his business that took him 40 years to build would collapse in seconds. So he says that if I had discarded all those defective cylinder heads, then my business would have gone to the streets. Then my business would have gone into rags. My business would be finished, and what would I be? And it took him 40 years to build this business, and I couldn't see it collapse in seconds. So this was basically what Joe Keller was thinking. Being ignorant, he had never thought that the engine heads would be fixed in the aircrafts without being checked. So he was uh, Paul Blumberg has actually termed it as ignorance, but I wouldn't call it ignorance though. He was 60. He was a man in his 60s. He was a well experienced man. He had run a business for past so many years. So I don't think he was actually ignorant of this fact, but he chose to ignore this fact. So it was a criminal mindset, I'd say, but still, Paul Blumberg has called him ignorant, so we'll go on with ignorant. So they're saying that because he's ignorant, he did not think that this would have such big implications on him that that the army wouldn't check the engine heads and fix them before fixing them into the aircrafts. Before a report was sent to him about the status of the engine. I think this word arid here is written wrong. So he's saying that I never thought that the army wouldn't check the engines and that they wouldn't send me any report about the status of the engines. Keller is no cynical profiteer, so they're saying that he is not a person with a criminal mindset that he deliberately makes wrong things. He deliberately do these kinds of acts in order to gain profit. They're saying that this was a mistake. This was a one-time mistake. And he does not always deliberately reduce the margins of safety in order to increase his margin of profit. So he's a good businessman, but this was a one-time mistake that he committed. Miller sees him as the simple man who has got on by energy and willpower, but who is hardly clever enough to know how he has done it. So Miller kind of portrays Joe Keller as a person who is full of energy, who is full of motivation, who is full of willpower, but he does not know where he gets this willpower from and how he has done the things that he has. Like he doesn't know how he became this successful. All he know that he did what he had to do. He had a lot of willpower. He had the energy to keep on going again and again, even though he failed several times. But in reality, he has no actual practical idea how he got where he is, how he became this successful. There is no vice in him, so they're saying that there is no bad thing about him. There is no wrong thing in him. The actual meaning of a vice is, however, that there is no bad habit in him or a moral failing. He is not morally wrong. He is not morally a bad person. Morally, he is a good person. Only littleness and his form of myopia. The only thing wrong about him is that he has a little. He has a kind of littleness in a form of myopia. Like he has a short vision. He does not think of the greater good. He thinks of the immediate or the near good and he does not take into consideration a lot of people. He only takes into consideration his immediate family. So he does not have a big vision, he does not have a very broad vision, he has a very small vision. He is genuinely unable to visualize the public consequences of what was for him a private act. So he could not imagine what the consequences the public would have to face. For him, it was just a private act that I did this, and it wouldn't have a very big consequence. He couldn't imagine the consequence that his actions would have. Trying to fulfill the roles of a father and a husband, Joe Keller sees an obligation towards his family and a father's duty towards his son to work for their future interests. So he wanted to fulfill both the roles of a father and a husband successfully, and he sees that he has a kind of duty. He has a duty towards his family and a duty towards his sons to look for their future interests, to look for their future careers. Keller believes that there is nothing bigger than one's family, and for him, father-son relationship is above all relationships. Like all men, he too has his own material interests and strives to work for the monetary gains of his family. So he believes that there is nothing bigger than a family or a father-son relationship. And like every other person, he also wants to gain a lot of money for his family. We all want to gain a lot of money, we all want to get rich for our families, right? And in the same way, he too wanted to. Like other people, he is not bothered about the damage to society that he brings while ensuring economic stability to his family. And just like other people, he is not bothered about what the consequences the other people would have to face for his actions. He is only concerned about how to bring economic stability to his family.
कितना पड़ेगा भाई?
So Keller's values are no different from those of any ordinary man living in the American capitalist society. So during that American capitalist society, there is a kind of idea that you need to get rich. You need to have a lot of money in order to be respected too. They don't mainly respect you because of what social impact you have brought on the society or what kind of good deeds you have done. They basically respect you out of your money or out of your economic stability, how rich you are. So being rich is equal to being powerful, is equal to being respected in the American capitalist world, where and there was a maddening competition in business. Obviously everyone wants to establish their own business because business is the only actual place. Business is the only actual way in which you can become really rich. I mean, even if you become a government servant of the highest level, let's say you become the chief secretary of a state, then still what would your income be? It would be around 1.5 lakhs to 2 lakhs per month, right? How much can you earn at maximum in 1 year? You can earn about 24 lakhs, right? But a big businessman can earn about crores of rupees per month. So you can never compare to him in monetary gains, right? So that is why everybody had a maddening desire to start his own business, a maddening competition in this business. Being a practical man, Keller is unable to live up to the expectations of his son Chris, an idealist. So Chris is an idealist. He thinks about the greater good of the society, of how to bring in positive impact into the society. Keller thinks about how to gain money, how to be rich, and look after his family. His family includes only his two sons and his wife. For Chris, his family is all his whole nation. The letter written by Larry reveals that he committed suicide by allowing his plane to crash, shamed by his father's involvement in fraud and profiteering. So I don't think I need to explain this one. Keller finally understands the disastrous implications of his actions. He realizes in the end the responsibility he had to all 21 pilots who lost their lives and that there is no real forgiveness for his act. So in the end, Keller, however, still realizes that his responsibility does not only stretch to his two sons and his wife. His responsibility was for all those pilots that he killed, that died because of his mistakes, that died because of his actions, his selfish actions. And he also realized that nothing he can do can actually is worth any forgiveness. So for him, the only way that he can repay for this crime and escape from this guilt is by killing himself, is by committing suicide. It would also save his son Chris from further humiliation. Joe Keller has a tragic end after he makes a wrong choice between the interests of the family and those of the nation. He is a flawed character. He is not a bad character. He is not a ruthless, a harsh character, but he is a flawed character. You can say he has some kind of he's some kind of he's a kind of faulty character, you can say. Not a bad one, not a wrong one, but a kind of faulty one. Someone with whom the audience can empathize and whom they can forgive. So he's a kind of character that the audience can connect with, and a character that they can truly forgive. So this is what Joe Keller really was. This is the characterization of Joe Keller. And in the next video, we'll cover the characterization of Chris Keller. It's of about the same length. So see you next time.